Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something kind of fascinating? I think so. At least I hope so. Today we're going to be exploring the science behind boosting happiness. And you know what? Yours especially.
Awesome.
We've got articles from the World Economic Forum. We've got some stuff from the Greater Good Science Center, Children's Health Council,
Wow.
among others. And we'll be unpacking a super interesting study from the Huberman Lab podcast. So,
Yeah, I'm excited about that one.
me too. It's going to be good. So what's the mission today? We're going to uncover some actionable, science-backed strategies to amp up your happiness levels. Think of this as like a toolkit for a brighter, more fulfilling life.
I love that.
Yeah, right.
A toolkit.
Exactly.
I love it.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Okay. So one of the biggest things I learned going into all this research is that happiness, it's less about luck or circumstance and more about choice.
That is a common misconception. A lot of people think happiness is just a fixed trait, but research actually shows we have a significant amount of influence over our own happiness levels.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Right, yeah. Like, take this example, Yale professor Laurie Santos. She points out that while wealthier people tend to report higher levels of happiness than those with fewer resources, the difference isn't as drastic as you might think.
So that whole, if I just had X, then I'd be happy, idea might be a myth.
It very well could be. It's not so much about what we have, but about how we approach life, And get this, what's even more fascinating is that research shows small, consistent actions can actually make a huge impact on our happiness levels.
Now, this is what gets me really excited. We're talking about things like expressing gratitude and engaging in acts of kindness, things that, everyone listening right now can do.
Exactly. And it's not just like feel-good fluff. I mean, there's actual solid science that backs it up. I mean, just look at all the studies that show consistently practicing gratitude, like just taking a few minutes every single day to write down 3 things that you're grateful for can actually lead to long-term increases in happiness and, get this, a decrease in depressive symptoms.
It's so cool, isn't it? I mean, to think something as simple as just noticing the good in your life can have such a profound impact.
I know, right?
And, while we're on the subject of simple actions, let's talk about helping others. I mean, the research on helping others, it's honestly mind-blowing.
It is. Like, have you heard of pro-social spending?
No, tell me more.
Okay, so the concept of pro-social spending is really intriguing to me. Studies have shown that spending money on other people, even small amounts, can actually boost your own happiness levels, sometimes even more than receiving a large financial bonus yourself.
That's amazing.
I know. Think about it. The act of giving, it seems to light up different parts of our brain than receiving.
It really makes you question that whole thing about humans being inherently selfish. It's like we're wired for generosity in a way.
It is fascinating. It really challenges our assumptions about human nature.
Now, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about social connections. We all know that they're vital for happiness. But one of the things that actually surprised me going into this research is that it's not always about those deep, meaningful conversations that we often think about.
That's a good point.
I used to think I needed hours of heart-to-heart talks to feel truly connected. But then I realized that just those quick, lighthearted interactions throughout the day, like just a quick chat with the barista, a wave to a neighbor, all those little moments actually add up to something really meaningful.
Absolutely. And there's even research from the Huberman Lab that actually supports this. They found that regular, even brief eye contact with familiar faces can create this sense of social bond and predictability in our brains.
So it's like those little moments or these little shots of feel-good chemicals just from a simple hello or a smile.
Pretty much.
So we don't necessarily have to schedule hours of deep conversations to reap the benefits of social connections, which is good because who has time for that these days? So let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the importance of mindfulness and focus.
Okay.
This is a big one for me. I've definitely noticed a difference in my mood when I'm fully present versus when my mind is racing with a million different thoughts. It's almost like presence is like a superpower.
It really is. And there's some really intriguing research out there that suggests that a wandering mind is often an unhappy mind. So even if you're doing something that you don't really find enjoyable, focusing on it can actually lead to greater happiness than just letting your thoughts drift off.
And think about it. Think about your own experiences. Have you noticed the difference in your mood when you're fully engaged in something versus when your mind is just kind of scattered? It's like 2 completely different worlds.
Totally. Yeah. And, you mentioned earlier that you had sort of an aha moment about the power of those small seemingly insignificant interactions.
Yeah.
Well, I want to kind of dive a little deeper into that because the Huberman Lab research also explored this idea of brief social connection. And it's not just about eye contact.
Okay.
So they actually found that even those quick exchanges with familiar faces, like just a wave to your barista or a chat with the mail carrier, can actually trigger that sense of social bond and predictability.
Wow.
And it taps into this part of our nervous system that actually thrives on routine and recognition.
Just like those little moments kind of remind us that we're like part of this larger web of connection, even if it's just fleeting.
Right.
It's pretty cool.
It is. It really reinforces our sense of belonging, which is, one of those really core components of happiness.
Okay.
And you know what? It turns out those brief connections can be even more powerful than we realize, especially when they involve touch.
Oh, interesting. So, like, are we talking about hugs here?
Hugs are great, but there's this really interesting concept called allo-grooming.
What?
Allo-grooming. It's basically the act of, grooming each other, like primates do.
It's like monkeys picking bugs out of each other's fur.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously with humans, it takes, slightly different forms. Like think about brushing someone's hair, giving a massage, or even just a friendly pat on the back.
Oh, okay.
And research actually shows that allo-grooming, that non-sexual consensual touch, triggers the release of oxytocin.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a hormone linked to bonding and social connection.
Ah, that explains that warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you hug someone.
Exactly.
So are you saying like a hug from a friend or a head scratch from your dog could actually be like a secret happiness booster?
It very well could be.
Okay, I like this.
Now, let's shift gears again.
Okay.
And let's explore this concept that might seem a little counterintuitive.
Okay.
It's the idea that having fewer choices can sometimes actually lead to greater happiness.
Fewer choices. Okay, now my brain is doing a little twist. Isn't like more freedom, more choices usually associated with more happiness?
You would think so, right? But it's actually not as simple as it seems. Research, particularly from Dan Gilbert's lab, has shown that when we're constantly bombarded with choices, like what to eat, what to buy, even who to date, it can lead to this thing called choice overload.
Choice overload. So like too many options, too little happiness.
Exactly. And choice overload can leave us feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and even less satisfied with the decisions that we do make. It's like our brains get exhausted from all the decision making.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. So how do we combat this choice overload? Like, do we need to become hermits and live in the woods with like limited options?
There's no need for extreme measures. I mean, one key is to be mindful about the choices that we make and to actively limit our options after we've made a decision.
Oh, okay. So like closing the menu after you order at a restaurant.
Exactly. It's about committing to our choices and savoring what we have rather than constantly second-guessing ourselves.
Yeah, I like that. It's like shifting our focus from what we don't have to what we do have.
Exactly. And there's actually a neurological basis for this. Yeah. So when we keep our options open, even just mentally, it can actually diminish the activity in our reward circuitry.
Wow.
Meaning that we experience less pleasure from the choices that we actually make.
It's like we're diluting our own happiness by clinging to those what-ifs.
Exactly. So by consciously limiting our choices and embracing what we have chosen, we can actually amplify our feelings of satisfaction and happiness.
You know, it's a powerful reminder that sometimes less is truly more when it comes to happiness.
I agree.
Yeah, I know we've talked about some, but there's one more concept I want to touch on.
Okay.
And it's this idea that happiness isn't just about feeling good all the time. It's also about finding meaning and purpose.
I completely agree. True happiness often goes beyond those fleeting moments of joy. It involves this feeling like our lives have direction and significance.
It's like having a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
Exactly. It's like feeling like we're contributing to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And, that sense of purpose, you can find it in so many areas of life, like our work, relationships, hobbies, volunteer activities.
Absolutely.
It's about aligning our actions with our values, right? And making choices that feel really authentic to who we are.
Precisely. And when we actually find that alignment, it can bring this really deep sense of fulfillment that transcends just mere pleasure or just fleeting happiness.
It's not just about chasing those highs. It's about building a life that feels really rich and meaningful.
Exactly.
Even when it's challenging.
And you know what? There are so many ways to cultivate that sense of meaning. One really powerful strategy is to engage in activities that tap into your strengths and your passions.
So like, if you're creative, maybe you write a poem.
Yeah.
Or if you love solving problems, you could volunteer to help a friend in need.
Exactly. When we use our talents to make a positive impact, it really fuels our sense of purpose and it brings this really deep sense of satisfaction.
It's like we're each given this unique set of superpowers
Right.
and using them to make the world a little brighter.
Yep. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that even small acts of service can make a big difference. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to contribute to our communities, our families, or even just to our own well-being.
So like offering a helping hand to a neighbor or just taking the time to really listen to a friend who's going through something.
Precisely. It's about weaving those acts of kindness and purpose into the fabric of our everyday lives.
Remember earlier when you were saying how happiness can be contagious.
Yeah.
So by spreading a little kindness and purpose, we're not just boosting our own happiness, we're contributing to this more positive ripple effect.
Absolutely. It's this beautiful cycle of giving and receiving.
Yeah.
And it all starts with these small, intentional choices that we make every single day.
Now, before we wrap things up, I think it's important to acknowledge that cultivating happiness, it's an ongoing journey, not a destination.
Right.
And it's not always easy.
You're absolutely right. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be setbacks. Life is unpredictable. Our moods are going to fluctuate.
But the key is to develop this toolkit of strategies that can help us navigate those inevitable rough patches and to keep returning to those practices that nourish our well-being.
Absolutely. And it's also really important to remember that we're all different.
Yeah.
So what works for one person may not work for another. It's really about finding those practices that resonate with you and that fit into your unique life.
So it's about experimenting, being curious, and discovering what truly brings us joy and fulfillment without judgment.
Exactly. And there's absolutely no shame in seeking support when we need it. Whether it's from friends, family, a therapist, or other resources, reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into happiness, what are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you?
I think for me, it's the realization that happiness it's so much more than just a fleeting feeling.
Yeah.
It's like a state of being that we can actively cultivate through the choices we make in our actions and our mindsets.
I love that. It's about taking ownership of our own well-being and realizing that we have way more agency than we think.
Absolutely. And, it's not about achieving some perfect, unattainable state of bliss.
Yeah.
It's about finding those practices that bring us more joy, more meaning, and deeper connection to ourselves and the world around us.
It's a journey, right? Not a destination.
Totally.
There'll always be bumps along the way.
Yeah.
But we can learn to navigate them with grace and resilience.
Absolutely. And as we continue on this journey, I think it's so important to remember the power of those small actions.
Yeah.
Like those seemingly insignificant things that we do every single day can really have a ripple effect, on our own happiness, but also on the world around us.
A smile for a stranger, a helping hand for a friend, just a moment of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these things, they're like seeds of happiness that we can plant.
They are. And those seeds can blossom into a garden of happiness, enriching not only our lives, but the lives of those around us.
Beautifully put. And for all of you out there yearning for more enriching deep dives into a world brimming with curiosity and discovery, I invite you to join us on the All Sorts podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where our words come alive with vibrant visuals. And follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads for daily doses of inspiration.
I love it.
Let's illuminate the world with knowledge together. And before we sign off, we want to hear from you. What resonated most from today's exploration? What steps will you take to cultivate more happiness in your life?
Yeah, let us know.
Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Until next time, may your journey be filled with joy, meaning, and of course, plenty of happiness.